Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome to Big Blend Radio. You know, we are the Big Blend, and we love it when we get to chat with guests who have a project that goes on multiple channels of Big Blend Radio's network. We're going to be talking about the arts. We're going to be talking about history. We're going to talk about women's rights. This is very exciting. So we have an amazing couple joining us, Jennifer Schwed and Doug Bradshaw. They partnered together to create this amazing audio musical journey that you can get online. It's an audiobook that's a musical. So this is super cool. So it's called 19, the musical. And this really goes into the 19th Amendment. So it's all about the women who fought to get the right to vote, right? And so they bring in stories. Yes, there's the famous women, but there's always other people we don't know about. So we're very excited to have Jennifer and Doug on the show. But ladies first, sorry, Doug, but welcome, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having us.
Hey, it's good to have you here. And welcome, Doug. How are you?
I'm doing just great. Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you both here. And Doug, so I wanted to know, did you ever think you were going to be doing an audiobook that's a musical about women's right to vote?
I was born to do this. So yes.
I love this. I love this.
No, it was very, very much a surprise. It was a great idea by Jen. And yes, it's a good story. You should tell that story, Jen.
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay.
Put you on the center stage.
No, that's fine. Happy to tell it. Doug and I were finishing up another production about Edgar Allan Poe. We had just come off this large scale immersive show that we had written, created, directed, produced, and we thought, what are we going to do next? And the year was 2016, and I really thought we were heading right towards our first female president, and wouldn't it be a great honor artistically to tell the story of how women won the right to vote? And so the timing was a little odd because we didn't wind up with the first woman president. So we sort of tabled the idea for a few months, and then the Women's March happened in the winter of 2017, I believe. And, seeing all these women pour out into the streets made both of us realize now is absolutely the time to tell the story of women, what they've done for this country, and how they've advanced their own cause.
I love that because it's interesting too when you listen to the music and the singing. You've got these styles that really take you also through some of the roots of American music too, to me, when you listen.
Absolutely. We did a mix of styles. So the story takes place pre-1920. It goes through 1920, which is when the passage of the 19th Amendment happened. So we chose musical styles leading up to that. There's something of a gospel influence, jazz. Doug, you can also jump in here on the musical influences, but we definitely went with the styles of the era.
Well, it's interesting because, Doug, aren't you and Jennifer, but basically mostly your background is in playwriting, making movies, and doing multimedia, but bringing the musical aspect in. Was that a little different for you both? Or Doug, was that something that you're both used to working with in doing musicals?
No, completely neophyte. we were
cool though.
Thankfully we got a great composer in Charlie Barnett who joined this, but we had never done anything like this. We don't read music. We'd never written lyrics, or actually Jen has written a little bit of lyrics, but we'd never done anything like this. So this was completely stumbling around, trying to figure it out, and having a good time doing it.
I think it's timely. I mean, right now it's out. I know you were talking about, the year you thought we'd have a female president, a lady president. Um, and now we're back in the saddle of another election. And, yeah, this is a good time to think about that right to vote, because I think it's timely. We talk about history of women, really fighting to have this vote. And even when you look back in Quaker women of what they did for the rights of African Americans, even Native Americans, they stood up, and I think a lot of times we forget that in today's modern history, what Quaker women did for us women. Did you find any of that when you were putting this together, Jennifer, about what Quaker women kind of stood up for?
Absolutely. I mean, you have Alice Paul, who was a Quaker, and Alice Paul's mentor, or I should say the woman that she really looked up to and wanted to follow in her footsteps, was Susan B. Anthony, who also was a Quaker. So I think you have this legacy of these women who were following in the footsteps of what they had been wanting to apply, what they had learned, what they had been taught, and applying it to the humanity around them, and in raising everybody up and fighting for equality.
And justice. And yet you think, because they were really our Puritans, right? The Quakers were really our Puritans, and some of the most history. I mean, you guys are, back east, and you have more of that history where you are. And I think we were in Odessa, Maryland. Yeah, Odessa, a small little area, by an awesome Blackfoot Wildlife Refuge. Or am I getting my places mixed up? I am. I've got them twirled around. That's another Maryland thing. That was in Easton. Sorry. Anyway,
Easton's gorgeous.
Easton is awesome. If you ever go to stay at the Hummingbird Inn, it is awesome. But we were staying at a bed and breakfast in Odessa, and went to this very historic home built in the 1700s. I was like, wow, this is amazing. It was a Quaker house, and they had like a little area where they were part of the Underground Railroad. And this, we were always on the west coast of the States living here. And so this was like, wow, this is the first real thing I've seen of this. I couldn't believe how tiny these little like cubby holes of where they hid people, and learned so much about the Quakers that, people always, oh, they're the Puritans and, all of that. And I went, wow, no, you've got to think about it. They came over on the Mayflower. They took risks. They even had to go to Holland before they got here to fight for their religious rights. Come over here, and they wanted people to have their rights too, to be part of that. And they really stood up for it. I mean, they didn't even have mirrors in their house. They were that, you don't look in the mirror because that's vanity, So it was pretty interesting. And then when you keep going through the lines to where you guys are, where you're bringing out this history of women getting together for the right to vote, it's pretty amazing. And I think that strength comes from when they first came over to the States. That line of that strength. When I don't know if that how far you go into I go in rabbit holes when it comes to these kinds of things, so you can shut me up at any time. But did you find like yourself going into rabbit holes putting this together, Jennifer or Doug, either one of you?
Definitely went down many a rabbit hole. Doug may have gone farther down the Quaker rabbit hole, and Doug went to a Quaker school. So
you went to Quaker school? Oh my gosh. So tell me, am I way off from what I'm talking about? Or like, Come on, I want to know.
Well, I mean, I'm certainly no expert on it. I mean, it was just really about the academics there. I mean, it was for, what we really were taught there was, academics and, peace. So it wasn't, a ton of Quaker religiosity or anything like that. And in terms of the studying, the research that we did for this, we definitely had to learn a tremendous amount, because I think like most of your listeners, I'm just going to make an assumption that if they were like us in school, they didn't learn a ton about the suffrage movement in the U.S. I mean, I think that most of us were, in seventh or eighth grade, you had your American history class, and they said that, women fought long and hard to get the vote, and eventually they got it. And Susan B. Anthony was a big player in this, and she had a $50 named after her in the 70s or something like that. That's literally all I knew about suffrage. So we had to do a lot of reading, and as we always say, we're not historians. We're just writers, directors, producers, creatives, and we read a ton, spoke with a bunch of academics, and tried to build a story out of a history that was kind of difficult to follow because unlike, say, Hamilton, where you've got huge amounts of history, you've got huge amounts of men who are beating their chests and writing everything that they did down. A lot of these women were kind of, as you were saying, they didn't even have a mirror in the house. And so they were, not that type of chest poundy, blaring the bugle saying, "Hey, look at me and everything I've done." These were different type of people.
And in fact, oh, sorry, Doug, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was probably about to go off on some random tangent, so reel me back in. I'm fine with
that.
Go ahead, Ken.
in line with their history not being told or recorded, just to go down that path a little bit, Alice Paul, who we make the center of our story in 19, and we credit her with being the one who really pushed the 19th Amendment over the finish line. When she was interviewed by newspapers and documentarians in later years, she always said, "I didn't want to record this. I didn't do this for attention." And that feeling that so many of these women, whether they felt that way because of their religion or background, or they felt that way simply because as a woman, you're told not to crow about your accomplishments. There's sort of this reticence to champion what you accomplish yourself. So, there's a combination of factors of why their stories aren't told. And we say right at the outset of the show, the story is buried in history. And especially as a woman, I feel an imperative to tell the stories of women. So they may not have wanted to tell their story, and men may not have wanted to write their story, but times have changed, and I would like to right that wrong.
I think it's important too when you're talking about how she just didn't want to really be known about it, because that kind of goes back to the Quaker way of, I don't want to shine the spotlight on me because I'm part of God and I'm part of everyone, right? It's kind of that, don't look in the mirror like I was talking about, because then the vanity is not part of their lifestyle or moral compass. And when you think now, sometimes people get on a platform and it's, look at me, I'm going to use this issue to drive spotlight on me. You know what I mean? They're out there.
Oh, of course.
Turn on the news, turn on any show, right? The big mainstream stuff, and you'll see everybody going, I'm going to jump on this. And honestly, I'm not going to knock it, because whatever we can do for certain issues, that's a good thing. And I think still working on women's rights, as our rights are going away right now in some ways, right? So this is a very timely thing, not just because it's an election year, because there's more elections, not just presidential. We do need to stand up and vote, because it can go away, as we're seeing right now with other women's rights. They can go away. If you don't use it, you could lose it for sure.
Absolutely. 1000%. And one of the, I'll say, depressing things about telling this story. So we've been performing it, working on it for now, 7, 8 years. And when we were performing it live pre-COVID, we would always do a Q&A after each little performance. They were almost like workshops. And the one thing that struck us every time was the story is still relevant, and that is sad. This story should be historical. The fighting for your right to be equal, to be considered fully human under the
Above
law.
livestock, right? Because
Yes.
weren't we livestock just like slaves were livestock?
I mean, the idea that 100 years on, this feels fresh is not a good thing. But this should be in our rear view mirror, and it's not.
Doug, for you in making this, how did that feel like in regards to women's rights and learning about it? And like you were saying, this was like that blip in high school. And I find that with a lot with history. And I think a lot of people didn't get excited about history to learn the past, which teaches us what to not repeat, right? Because of I think it's just, I mean, I read historical novels like as a kid, like I ate them up, but I was 11 years old reading War and Peace. That is not trying to brag. I have no clue what I read, but I did it. And I was into it. I read all kinds of things. I just didn't know everything that was going on at the time. And then my mom was like, you shouldn't be reading this part. But she says, I better explain it to you now. This is what prostitution is. And this is what women did when they first came to America. Because that was, if you're an Irish woman, how many Irish women had to be prostitutes in a boarding house, or just, it's just, you've got to think about what it was, right? And so there was that education. And sometimes I think in novels, it can be romanticized a little bit too much, and in movies, but we have to have that grit. And I think we do want to know those stories so it inspires us to do it, to make change, make positive change, and not give up hope, because it's so easy to give up hope. But there's a resiliency in women. So Doug, did you find any resiliency, anything through this story as you were learning it and going, you went to Quaker school? What changed for you doing this?
Oh man, I mean, to say like, I know people say, "Oh, everything is an honor," but I actually mean that seriously. I mean, when we did our first reading, it was with a cast, and we had what was about 10 or 15 women, and Charlie, our composer, and me, and I think there's maybe one other guy there. And basically, Jen set this up so that it was like a round table. We were all sitting on the ground, and we were kind of, Jen kind of asked these questions about to kind of set this stage, and to ask the women, how they had been impacted by different aspects of misogyny, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, for me, I felt like I was being included in a club that I was not a part of, and hearing firsthand accounts of things that, I mean, obviously I read about it. I heard about it from friends who are, women or family members, et cetera. But it was kind of a stunning moment. I mean, I think it was emotional obviously for the women who were sharing and things like that. But it was definitely one of those things that I had to take a step back and say this was pretty unusual for a knuckle dragging football fan like myself to be in this situation. And then also literally the history of what these women did and what they endured here in Washington, D.C. at the hands of, men who were beating them in the streets, police who had incarcerated them and were torturing them. I mean, these women were tortured. I mean, the what they went through is mind-boggling. I mean, it's one of those not my country type of things. No, it happened. So,
but this is why I think a musical is a good platform, and the fact that it's an audiobook, right? And so many, I think a younger generation is going to grasp onto this, which I think is really exciting. because so many people are, I mean, I know podcasts kick butt, man. That's why we do it, because people listen on their way to school, on their way to work, on a train, cleaning house. It's something you can listen to in bed at night. You're tired of the screen, just listen. Um, and the musical part of it, having the music aspect, that's what I was going back to, the different parts of roots music, whether it's jazz, which is a pure American art form, right? That wouldn't be here without the African Americans. Thank you very much. But anyway, that music and gospel and things like that, there's something about, I'm a musician, so, and a singer. So and a songwriter. And so why I really love what you're doing is there is an emotion that comes through music that can touch you. It's indescribable. It is, you may not even hear the words. And I know I hate to say that to the two of you since you're writers and the words are really important. But sometimes it's going to be the song that touches your soul, the core being. When you have pain and you hear that wail or that sound in music, or that, do you know what I mean? It's a sense memory in a weird way. It's, and it will stick with you. You're going to remember, you're going to get earworms. You're going to have all of that experience where a song sticks with you and you may start singing it in the car or whatever. I think it's also a way for multi-generations to come together and appreciate. So Jen, do you want to touch on that a little bit? How do you feel about the music aspect with that kind of, it's an emotional thing when you listen and you really hear the way music can move you.
Absolutely. And we took, and speaking specifically to the emotion part of it, we took some American patriotic songs and we turned them into these we gave them this sort of dirge quality of My Country 'Tis of Thee, that there's this very slow, somber version of it in the show where it is sung over a scene of torture. And being able to use the music to elevate the drama of what was happening, to Doug's point, what he said earlier of the unknown terror that these women faced and the elation at what they accomplished. I mean, all of this underscores the story, and that's why it always felt like this has to be a musical. This is how we're going to elevate it.
And, I'm going to have to put you guys on our Rants, Raves, and Rock and Roll podcast channel now, right? Because the rant is the women didn't get the vote. The rave is they did get the vote. And we always say rock and roll is the conduit in between. The music is the glue, the balance, right? So you may not have rock and roll as much, but rock and roll wouldn't be there without jazz. So, it's going to say or gospel, quite frankly. None of it.
Go.
So, yeah. So I think I think what you've done is really that balance, right? To tell the story and get people connected with it. So I know this was like a stage thing, and then you did complete audio, right? So when you recorded this, was this separate from it being like on stage, or how did that work? Doug, do you want to talk about that, or which one of you want? Yeah, go ahead. Tell us how this was actually put together.
Yeah. So, quick version, which I'll try and be quick, is that, we're about to go to New York right before COVID because we had just done the full show here in DC after 30 some odd pieces, small workshops where we showed off different parts of the show. Did the full show. We were excited, and we were, that was end of 2019. And so we were gearing up to go to New York. COVID hit, totally derailed our plans to do not an investor reading, but a industry reading for directors and producers, etc. And so we ended up, we took a hiatus during COVID because obviously COVID, and then Jen had the idea that maybe we should actually try and bring this to a larger audience. And that's when uh, uh, she actually said, let's make this into an audiobook. And so we actually had to rewrite the script because the show is very visual. And
Yeah.
um, so we had to change different scenes to accommodate that. And we had to, we added a narrator, and we already kind of had an onstage narrator of sorts. So I don't want to give away anything, but we brought in some extra history there to accomplish that. And so we ended up kind of giving this character those kind of setup lines that you might have, like scene one, act three, Alice Paul's office, that type of stuff. So we added that type of thing so that people could get the feel for the room they were in. Yeah, it definitely changed. It changed a lot because then we had to, once we rewrote it, and we had to, get the band back together and, had to bring in some new folks because some of our people were, had moved away or were in other shows. And so then we had to, rerun a handful of very fast rehearsals and whatnot, and then get into the studio. And our goal was to get this out very quickly once we got it done. And so we're trying to get it out for Women's History Month this year. And so we slammed out a few days in the studio, and none of us had ever done that before. So that was a totally different animal. And then we had to work with the audio engineer and do a lot of edits, and it was pretty wild. It was a fascinating experience. We really loved it.
I think it's cool. I mean, because it's, because it's very creative, and at the same time it's passionate, and it's like, hello, wakey wakies, and gives you a way to mull it over. I think adding that music component is brilliant, and it changed your writing, didn't it, Jennifer? Did your writing kind of change, like how you do things, like how you see things as, this is what I've always done, and now I'm like switching myself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, telling a story that's combining, it's not, Hamilton is all songs. Hamilton is they're singing through the whole show. And here we're combining this written story and scenes and dialogue, and then weaving the music into it, which again, totally, completely brand new for us. It starts to infect the way you think and write going forward. And now when Doug and I work on new projects together, there's always a little bit of that, well, should that be music? Even though we're not doing a musical right now, it sort of sticks with you because and I say this to Doug all the time when we work together, there's a rhythm to writing, and it has to be, even if it's just spoken, it should be melodic and rhythmic. And that's how you know when you've heard good writing on a TV show, in a movie. It's all lyrical.
I agree. So tell everyone where they can find you online. I know social media 19, the musical number 19, the musical on Facebook, Instagram 19_ the musical. Where's the best place for people to find out where to actually purchase the audiobook?
So
the musical audiobook.
You can go to 19themusical.com, and we link to a number of places where it's available, including Audible, Chirp. It is on, oh goodness, how did I get stumped on this one? We have it listed in many places. It's in libraries now too.
Amazon, you got Amazon, all those kind of things too, or no?
Go to Amazon and
Barnes and Noble. I know
Barnes
you're on
and
there,
Noble.
right?
It is on Barnes and Noble. So you can check out our website, and it'll give you a list of places too where you can find it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us. Love what you do, and do not be strangers. I love what you do. And it has been a blast chatting with you, and all the best with this venture. And I hope you do more musicals. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.